quarter of a mile, turn left onto Great Southwest Road, A30.
It could be a very difficult moment for the Prime Minister.
Those three were all parliamentary private secretaries, the lowest rank of ministerial jobs, and they've all resigned those positions to sit on the committee. So that's, again, interesting. After that, we've got the...
Take the second left onto Great Southwest Road, A30.
And we've got the one up in the Midlands, which Labour is supposed to be able to win. So, again, those by-elections, they are only by-elections, they're very, very local, but do you think Tory MPs will be looking at them, calculating the swings and wondering about their own position after those?
There's a lot of worry amongst Tory MPs about their future. People with majorities of 15, 16,000 saying to me, I'm genuinely worried if he's in charge, I don't think I'll keep my seat. That's not a good place for the Prime Minister to be in. The first sort of hint we'll get about whether that's true is seats like Tiverton. Wakefield's more marginal, but still a big test, not just for Boris Johnson, also a test for Keir Starmer, that one particularly. If those two seats are lost, if the Tories lose them, fresh pressure undeniably will be placed on Boris Johnson. But even then, Andrew, I go back to this, there's a sense of inertia. There's still a sense, I said to 1P today, if you lose both those seats, would that be the tipping point? The answer, no. The only thing that they thought would change things was if there was another scandal they mentioned.
Continue on Great Southwest Road for 3/4 of a mile.
Would be the thing that would be more damaging for Boris Johnson, even than 2 by-election defeats in pretty safe seats.
This is Westminster. There will always be another scandal. For the moment, Ken, thank you very much. Brandon Lewis, Northern Ireland Secretary, is waiting for us. You're in Northern Ireland. Brandon, thank you for joining us. You've been observing, I'm sure, very closely what's happened today. Tobias Ellwood thinks that you can't win a general election again under Boris Johnson. Why is he wrong?
Well, I've got a lot of time to Tobias, and I like Tobias, but on this I think he is wrong. Yeah, I think he's wrong. I have to say, I think that Boris Johnson will not just lead it into the next election. I've said this before, I think he will win it. I think he'll win it for a couple of reasons. One is...
In 1/4 of a mile, take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
Manifesto we delivered in 2019 that people elected us to do. I think people will see that he got the big decisions right over the course of the Parliament, whether it's Ukraine or issues around COVID, and as we go forward also we need to deal with issues that people are seeing the challenge that the global inflation problems are causing for people.
Take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
Manifesto for next year election, and the PM does just connect with people in a way that most politicians struggle to do, and I see it with his...
In 1/4 of a mile, keep left at the fork to continue towards Southern Perimeter Road.
My constituents, I have to say, always very possible.
So you say he connects with people, and he said in the House of Commons he wanted with an arm around the British people, which in the circumstances might not have been the best metaphor. Do you understand, if he connects with people, why he didn't bother to ask anybody else in Downing Street about these parties and the wine stains on the walls and the debris everywhere and the vomit on the carpet and all of that, the music thumping about? Did he not ever think to turn to somebody and say, what was going on?
Keep left at the fork.
Well, one of the things I do know is that the Prime Minister himself has said today there are things in the Super 8 report that were news to the Prime Minister. Obviously, some of these events over that period of a couple of years, he wasn't actually in Downing Street at the time they had them. But he's done the right thing in taking that responsibility for those issues and apologising for that. And he has been putting in place the changes that were outlined in Super 8's initial interim report. And she's obviously noted that in the report today and welcome that.
I can't imagine...
In 1/4 of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
Tony Blair, or Gordon Brown, or John Major, or indeed David Cameron presiding over this kind of mayhem in Downing Street. What's happened to honour?
Well, I think there is. I have to say, I can't speak for what previous prime ministers I will have not been in number 10 and what was or wasn't happening there at the time. But what I do think is that I do think there is real alignment across actually the whole of Parliament. The whole parliamentarians, pretty much. We might have disagreements on how to achieve things, but we all come into politics primarily to try and make lives better for people. We just tend to disagree on how best to achieve that between our political parties and views. But we all come into this to try and make people's lives better. And one of the things I have seen consistently over the period, whether it's the people in Northern Ireland,
Right.
or across constituencies in the UK, is that's where the Prime Minister's focus has been.
Brandon, we were told again and again these parties hadn't happened. We were told again and again no rules were broken. The parties had happened. They were even wilder than we thought. The rules were
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road.
no.
Continue on Southern Perimeter Road for 1.5 miles.
Accept personal responsibility. I don't know what he means by that. I don't know what follows from that. There haven't been resignations. Nothing has gone, except that some very junior staff have been fined and have carried the can. Don't you think that the events of today are simply going to increase cynicism right across Britain? I'm afraid about politics generally.
Obviously, the police investigation has issued a number of fines across number 10 Downing Street and Cabinet Office, but there has been quite a substantial change. I mean, the Prime Minister changed his chief of staff. You don't get much more senior than that, certainly on the political side.
Yeah, what happened to the old chief of staff, Brandon? What happened to the old chief of staff?
He's gone back to the private sector.
So he's fine. I mean, he's fine. The private secretary.
Can't control where somebody moves next. This is once they leave government, no longer work for the government civil service.
Sure.
What they do in their private career is a matter for them. But
My point, Brandon, is that nobody.
Health changes, but I think importantly as well, which was recognised in Sue Gray's report today, is the structures and the way of working in number 10, which I think in light of some of the, and there were some things that are very difficult reading there today. Look, as somebody who used to run businesses, and I obviously as a Secretary of State and as a member of Parliament, have employees, the way some of the employees felt they've been spoken to is just not acceptable, and the changes that have been put in place to ensure that doesn't happen again as well, I think are equally important.
Can you imagine Boris Johnson doing anything that you wouldn't defend?
Well, I would hope not. That's one of the reasons why I think he's the right person to be Prime Minister.
I said imagine, but
the same with previous Prime Ministers. But you could say the same about any individual politician and what somebody might imagine. I've always said I don't tend to work in hypotheticals. I think it's much safer to focus on the reality of where we are. The reality of where we are is with a government that's led by a Prime Minister who's focused on delivering for people across the United Kingdom, and particularly at the challenging period we're at now. I think he is the right man for the job.
all right. I said earlier on that he took personal responsibility, I think 12 times in his common statement, and then again several times afterwards. Can you explain to people watching and listening what taking personal responsibility actually means in real terms?
I think for me what it means is actually acknowledging that if something's gone wrong, he is the person who leads that organisation and he accepts that things have gone wrong. That's why he's been putting changes in place, and it isn't actually about blaming other people or saying, right, well actually this was X, Y and Z. And I think quite rightly Sue Gray's report doesn't name a lot of the individuals who are involved in these issues.
In 1/4 mile at Western Perimeter Road roundabout, take the first exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
And that's why I think it is right. He is, as I say, as Sue Gray's report outlines, he has made the changes at number 10 to deal with those issues.
There was, I'm afraid to report, a certain amount of sniggering in the House of Commons when the Prime Minister said proudly that the senior management had all been changed, because the one member of the senior management who hasn't changed is, of course, him. And he is the man who sets the culture, who sets the tone. We even know that some of the people at the parties thought that he approved of them.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road.
Thought they had his personal approval. Isn't he the problem?
In 200 yards at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Airport Way, A3113.
He wasn't even in the building, so I think that's why it was right that he outlined that there have been those changes, so that the structure, not just the personnel, but the structure and the way of working number 10 is now very different, so that if people do feel there are issues there, they can report them, they can deal with them. Nobody should have to experience the kind of situation that was clearly there from security and cleaners was outlined today, I think, which was particularly painful and difficult reading for people. And he's put those changes in place, and that's something that Sue Gray in her report, as I say, has acknowledged.
Yeah. Brandon Lewis, live from Hillsborough Castle. Thanks very much indeed for joining me. Wes Streeting, one final point there. Brandon Lewis is right to say, is he not?
Exit the roundabout onto Airport Way.
Report, and she herself
Continue on Airport Way for half a mile.
Which was clearly very dysfunctional, has changed.
But the Prime Minister hasn't changed. The Cabinet Secretary hasn't changed. We've got this position now where they've effectively had to create a new number 10 department with new permanent secretaries, and we're told this is to clean up the culture of number 10. What kind of Prime Minister do we have? We're going to change the machinery of government around here to account for the fact that this is a number 10 staff get so smashed they're sick, where there's red wine up the wall.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 4th exit onto the M25 slip road to M4, M40.
Thank you very much indeed, Wes Streeting. Well, coming up, there was one Tory MP who would look the Prime Minister in the eye earlier in the Commons and reiterate his desire for him to resign. And that MP joins me here live. But first, Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The Shadow Health Secretary has told BBC the Conservative MPs are spineless for failing to get rid of the Prime Minister. Wes Streeting has told Tonight with Andrew Marr, Boris Johnson will be like an albatross around the party's neck at the next election. The Prime Minister says he takes full responsibility following the release of Sue Gray's report into Partygate, but Boris Johnson says the public wants him to now get on with the job. And a US state official says 19 children killed in a school shooting in Texas were barricaded in one classroom. 2 teachers were also killed at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. LBC weather clear for many areas tonight. Rain edging into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England and Wales. Lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
If you want to change the world, all you need is less plastics in our oceans, less carbon in our skies, less chemicals on vegetables, less wildlife that dies. Get a carbon neutral shop delivered to your door.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
You're getting so much more. Enjoy £10 off each of your first 3 shops of £20 or more with the code ORGANIC. ableandcold.co.uk. Easy, organic, everything. Conditions apply.
Failing dental bridges, gum problems and periodontal disease, broken or missing teeth. Don't feel like your life is on hold. There are solutions. Here's Andrew Darwood from the Darwood and Tanner Dental Practice.
Continue for half a mile.
Quick solutions to patients with urgent and routine dental needs. We're so happy to see our patients returning to us over the years with their problems resolved and still smiling.
Meet the team at darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
Have you lost £3,000 or more in a scam or fraud? If you've been unable to recover your money, then contact us for a no-obligation chat and we could help you get your money back. CELsolicitors.co.uk specialise in confidential, no-win, no-fee, fraud and scam claims. Please don't suffer alone. Tell CEL. We listen, we care, we win.
Hold on to your mugs. EE's Full Fiber is here. New broadband that can handle anything. And whatever you think that means, times it by a zillion and dip it in chocolate. Because this broadband connects 100 devices in your home. Search EE Full Fiber.
18.3% UK availability. Check coverage at ee.co.uk.
Where you from? Join me, Lily Almond, on my new podcast, Where You From, where I speak to big names about the intent behind that question. Listen and subscribe on Global Player.
This is LBC, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Well, the time is 6:34. If you're just joining us, it looks very much as if Boris Johnson is going to survive as Prime Minister, perhaps for quite a long time to come, despite the revelations in the Sue Gray report. But how...
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M25.
Head of political polling, the pollster Opinion. Chris, thanks for joining us. There is a view in the House of Commons that Boris Johnson remains a huge electoral asset to the Conservative Party, a campaigner like no other. And there is another view in the House of Commons represented in the studio who reverses the case, and he's a big drag of the Conservative Party's fortunes. From what you can see, who's right?
Continue on M25 for 1 mile.
You get asked questions by interviewers us which are difficult to answer, right? Particularly you, Andrew. That one very much doesn't fall into that camp. I mean, when we are looking at pretty much all of the polling numbers right now, Boris Johnson's approval rating has dropped quite substantially over the last couple of months, mostly off the back of Partygate, not completely, lots of other things have happened as well, but mostly off the back of Partygate. More people think that the moon landings were faked than think Boris Johnson has told the truth about what happened, and increasingly voters are turning around to pollsters like me and saying, well, if he ain't telling the truth about that, he's probably not telling the truth about all of these other issues that we care about as well. And just to
Chris,
put some final point. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, you come on to my next question, which easy or difficult, I'm not sure, probably quite easy as well, which is that, people will say, Partygate, life moves on, everyone's got a short attention span, there'll be other stories. And
in a quarter of a mile at junction 15, use the left lane to take the M4 exit to Reading, Slough.
People's consciousness, and it won't really do the Tories the kind of damage that we think now in the medium term.
So, I mean, firstly, I'd say that the public would generally agree with the sentiment that we do need to move on from this. And
use the left lane to exit at junction 15, then keep left at the fork.
Coming out, people were telling us, pollsters, this is a really important issue, it's important to get to the bottom of. Now they're telling us,
keep left at the fork.
We focus on lots of other issues. But I would make 2 points. Firstly, just because voters do want to move on, that doesn't mean it hasn't been damaging.
Continue on M4 for 1.5 miles.
Ratings that is very hard for a Prime Minister to come back from. And secondly, the issue that we're moving on to is the cost of living crisis. Now, this would always have been a very, very difficult issue for any Conservative government to handle. It's not them playing on territory that they're usually good on. It's an issue that the public
one negative to another one. You move from one negative to another. Can I just ask you, this is a sort of historical question, has any Prime Minister had approval ratings this low and then come triumphantly back again, so far as you're aware?
The closest example we've got is Thatcher in the early 80s, and that involved, an incredibly successful victory in a very short war. Now, I mean, that could happen over the next 6 months, but I think it's probably very unlikely.
For now, Chris, thanks very much indeed for joining us. And I'm going to turn now to somebody who knows all about Margaret Thatcher, Caroline Slowcock, who was her private secretary for a while, and you've written a book about her, Caroline. Now, very interestingly, Chris makes the point there that Margaret Thatcher had very, very low approval ratings before the Falklands War, admittedly, and she came back. How would you assess where she was then, where Boris Johnson is now?
Well, I think she came back because of her character. She was shown to be strong and effective and decisive at a critical moment for the country. And I think for Boris Johnson, at the moment, it is his character which is essentially under scrutiny, and he's seen as someone who is not trustworthy. And when you get into a war, the last thing you need is someone who is not trustworthy, when you cannot believe what they say.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Number 10. Now, I know number 10 in your time was probably a slightly different organisation, probably fewer people working. In fact, I'm sure there were fewer people working there. Nonetheless, is it conceivable that you'd have had parties like this under Margaret Thatcher?
Absolutely inconceivable that in a lockdown, parties like this would have happened. Parties like this didn't...
Keep right to stay on M4.
Because people were very aware that this was a very important place, that the optics really mattered. And, for her...
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
It was very important to them that they walked the talk. And, there she was... she was the message. If you're a leader, you are the message, and if you are breaking the rules, then you're doing something fundamentally wrong to democracy.
I can see that both her and John Major believe very, very strongly in the rules, in particular the rule of law. Do you think there's been an ethical falling off with a K in terms of the current government?
Yes. The proroguing of Parliament was an example of that. That is something that, despite that ridiculous scene in the Crown, Margaret Thatcher would never have, because she respected the institution, Parliament and the Queen, country. You can see it with the proroguing of Parliament, you can see it with his disregard for the ministerial code, and you can see it, in this particular instance with Partygate. This is a man who does not respect the rules. He can't even keep his mask on when he's in a hospital.
But there's one parallel, which is for sure, which is that he is as dominant in the modern Conservative Party as she was in her Conservative Party. And for all her hard edges, as it were, Margaret Thatcher was always able to hold that huge Conservative coalition somehow together. Do you look at the Conservatives now and see this coalition is coming apart?
I think it's definitely coming apart. It came apart when some very senior people in the party were turfed out of the party. That wasn't good for unity. But I think now there is a distinct difference between those who believe in the fundamentals of democracy, honesty, integrity, and standards of public life, and those who are prepared to back Boris Johnson whatever he does, just because he might be a vote winner. And there's something more important in this country than just simply winning elections. It is the quality of our democracy. It's what they're fighting for in Ukraine.
Very, very strong words indeed, Tobias Elwood. You stood up and you said what you thought to the Prime Minister. Very few of your colleagues have done the same, or certainly did so today in these circumstances. Do you ever look at your party and think, if this carries on for much longer, it is going to go in different directions? It's going to be, as it were, a traditional Conservative party, which you might be part of, and the Boris Brexit party. In other words, that this coalition can't carry on forever under this Prime Minister.
I think that's the big question we have to ask ourselves, is where is our party going? What do we stand for? What is that vision? The one thing, whether you liked it or loathed it, you were very clear about where Margaret Thatcher wanted to take the country, and everybody then bought into that. You also she had competence and confidence in her own ministers. You look at the Blair Brown years and those other documentaries and so forth, or The Crown.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Absolutely one of the more competent cabinet ministers. He just landed the Northern Ireland bill, which is so critical. Well done to him. But I'm afraid the competence of our cabinet, we have talent on the back benches. We don't know where our party is going. And it was reflected today, after the Prime Minister made his statement, how quickly the benches emptied and dispersed. Very, very few people actually went. And this is the concern I have, is many, many colleagues have been waiting for this Sue-Gray report to land, to be able to make a judgment on it. And I'm afraid there's a drift. I worry that there is a drift, that those MPs that aren't saying anything will have to defend this in public, and we end up taking ourselves to a general election which we'll probably lose.
Can I go a little bit David Attenborough at this point? And suggest that in the sort of Serengeti of Westminster, Boris Johnson is just this huge, very, very powerful, and to many people, intimidating character. I was quite rude about all his Tory opponents at the beginning of my programme today. I said it was that they're sort of vegetarians heading off into the undergrowth when he emerges.
I'm not suggesting I'm a vegetarian.
I wasn't suggesting that. What I was really asking though is, does the Conservative opposition to Boris Johnson have the heft, have the guts, have the other organs, if I can put it that way, to take him on, really? Or do you keep kicking the can down?
You see, this is within the Tory family, so even talking about opposition, I think, is actually the wrong language. It's actually persuading Boris Johnson to recognise that actually when you move from being an asset to a liability, you've got to put your hand up.
That's going well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, though. There is a momentum I see taking place where colleagues are recognising the difficulties that we're now facing. On what he's good at, Boris Johnson gets an A+. Campaigning mode and so forth, that energy, that zest, that determination, that ability to reach parts of the country in campaign mode. But the attention to detail, a vision, a strategy of moving forward, and then having good quality people willing to stand up to him, around him, I'm afraid he gets a D- for that. And that's
in 1/4 mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Wandered into number 10 and found one of those parties, what would she have done? Would she have had a quick drink and said, right, I'm out of here because I don't want to be tarnished with this, or would she have closed it down?
No, because she would have closed it down, absolutely, because, she realised
Not on her watch.
Not on her watch,
Exit at junction 6.
Then, we were all aware that everything we did reflected on the Prime Minister. It's just a fact. So, how they could have got into a situation...
In 1/4 mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tuns Lane, A355.
And if you have tough decisions coming over the hill, whether it be Ukraine, cost of living and so forth, you're going to have to take Britain into difficult places. That means placing demands on them. You can only do that if you have their support, if you have their trust. And the big concern I have is that we've eroded that trust with the British people, and we can't gain it back in time for the next election under the current trajectory.
You have put your letter in very publicly saying you don't have confidence in him, there should be a leadership campaign. We've got one more MP today, Julian Sturdy, coming out and saying much the same thing. But by and large, there aren't enough letters going in at the moment, as I understand it, to trigger such a campaign. How is that going? Do you think we're close again to a challenge, or do you think it's going to fall back again?
So it goes back to this point you touched on before. The gratitude that people have to Boris Johnson in getting us where we are today. The battles that we've had, they owe that to Boris. My question is he the right person for the battles in the future? Can we defend this behaviour? Can it actually prevent...
Exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
...distraction from getting on with the business, and ultimately, would it allow us to win the next election? Those are the three questions I said in the chamber, and I fear that unless there is a leadership challenge, which he could clarify easily by actually having a vote of confidence in himself. That would be an easy way to conclude this.
Tough question for you, Tobias. If Boris Johnson is still leader at the time of the next election, will you stand as a Conservative?
Of course I will, because it is the Conservative brand which I think is best for...
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
Your party has mocked Keir Starmer for trying to support the idea of Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister. Wouldn't it be very difficult for Conservative candidates to answer the question, but you don't approve of this man, you don't approve of him morally, you don't approve of the way he's run Downing Street, you don't approve of his judgment, so why are you trying to make him Prime Minister again?
I wouldn't be. I'd be trying to represent Bournemouth East constituents. I'd be trying to nudge the party in the right direction, and I would assume that on current...
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
And I would want to be part of the renaissance that then takes our party forward. We could all avoid that. We've got two difficult by-elections coming up. We've got a message that was the local elections told our party of where things are going.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
Clearly that we are in difficult waters, and the challenge that all my colleagues have is to recognise where this does go. And that difficult question, which is written in the small print of the unwritten contract that you have, that if your Prime Minister is in trouble, it is up to you as individuals to ask yourselves whether it's time for a leadership change.
How would you characterise, you don't like the word opposition, I understand that, how would you characterise that group of Conservative MPs, yourself, Tom Tugendhat and many others, who have spoken out against Boris Johnson, Jeremy Hunt, who clearly don't like what's going on? Is there an ideological grouping there? Are you, as it were, on the One Nation side of the party? Are you on the left of the party? Are you the...
No, and I think
are you?
It's important then to clarify this, because it isn't a caucus per se. It's actually those who believe in free market, a liberal economy, want to promote a vision for the country, but absolutely believe in discipline, focus and leadership. And these are the things that are absent in abundance at the moment in Number 10. I don't want to take away how much we've moved forward, but go back to Owen Paterson, when the Whip's office tried to trail us through the lobbies to support that. And even today, I just mentioned the fact that there was little support for the Prime Minister. But a couple of weeks ago, when the Privileges Committee went through and there was that amendment that the Whip's office attempted to put in, and realised that they couldn't actually support that. So the actual policy went through for the Privileges Committee to do a study on the Prime Minister, and the Whip's office itself didn't even have the intelligence to recognise that the Prime Minister just didn't have the support.
Tobias, Elwood, Caroline, thank you both very much indeed. A really interesting and slightly grave kind of conversation given where we are. Anyway, coming up, I'm going to be speaking to a former Foreign Secretary who first became an MP in, wait for it, 1974. So has Dame Margaret Beckett ever seen a government like this before in over 40 years in Parliament? I'll be asking her after this. The time is 6:48.
If you want to change the world, all you need is less plastics in our oceans, less carbon in our skies, less chemicals on vegetables, less wildlife that dies. Get a carbon neutral shop delivered to your door with Able and Coal Organic. You're getting so much more. Enjoy £10 off each of your first 3 shots of £20 or more with the code ORGANIC. ableandcoal.co.uk. Easy, organic, everything. Conditions apply.
It all started from your kitchen table. That's where you designed the logo, wrote a business plan, and built your website. Then you took the leap and opened a shop. Had your Uncle Paul tell you, most businesses don't make it past the first year, but you breezed past the first year. Then you discovered BT's digital marketing hub, an easy way to advertise online. Suddenly you had so many new customers you had to open a second store. Take that, Paul. You do your business, we'll help you find more. Search BT Digital Marketing Hub. BT means business.
If you or someone you know owned or leased a diesel vehicle between 2009 and 2020, you could be entitled to significant compensation. At My Diesel Claim, we're experts in handling these claims, and more than 600,000 people have already started their claim with us. Simply visit our site now to check your vehicle's eligibility instantly. It's free to sign up, and you can start your claim in seconds. Visit mydieselclaim.com and join thousands of others starting their claims today.
Let's take a moment for that last Big Mac mouthful. You wish you could have that first bite feeling all over again. Well, luckily for you, the Grand Big Mac and the Grand Big Mac Bacon are back at McDonald's, so you can spend longer with the taste you love. Served from 11 a.m. Available till the 7th of June. Participating restaurants only, subject to availability.
Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC.
The time is 6:50. Dame Margaret Beckett was the first female Foreign Secretary, and she first became an MP in 1974. In that time, she's been Leader of the Opposition and had many other roles, and she joins me now. I say you were Leader of the Opposition. That was a temporary role. Your party has never had a female leader. Does that embarrass you?
Yes, somewhat, but these things, there's a huge amount of luck in politics, more than people recognise. It's just never quite